But damn, they've done nothing to deal with the healthcare crisis that Republicans have created. We need to act with urgency now and extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits. Tens of millions of people are in open enrollment right now. They've seen that their health insurance premiums, copays, and deductibles are going to increase in some instances by $1,000 or $2,000 per month. That is unacceptable, unsustainable, and it's un-American. It's time for my Republican colleagues to stop burying their heads in the sand and do something to actually make life better for working class Americans, everyday Americans, and middle class Americans, as opposed to what Republicans have done the entirety of this year, which is just to focus on making life better for the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected. Enough pandering to big Republican donors. Enough. Do something. Partner with Democrats to lower the high cost of living and to make life better for the American people. Questions?
Mr. Leader, one of your members last night was indicted in Florida for supposedly, allegedly using COVID relief funds from FEMA to bolster her campaign. If the Ethics Committee comes back and corroborates those claims that were made in the indictment, would you expect Congresswoman Shirtless McCormick to resign?
Sheila is entitled to the presumption of innocence like every other American. She's entitled to her day in court, and she's entitled to a jury of her peers who are going to follow the facts and be guided by the law. Thank you.
After this week of censures and back and forth over that, Congressman Don Beyer and Don Bacon introduced a proposal to increase the threshold for approving that. Is that something you would support?
Don Beyer is an extraordinary and thoughtful member of Congress. We haven't had the conversation about this issue, but I'm open-minded about what the possibilities are in terms of getting the Congress out of this repeated effort by Republicans to censure members, because these extremists in the House Republican Conference have nothing better to do. That's what this week has proven. They were forced to vote on a bill to compel the Department of Justice to release the Epstein files, and they were reluctantly supportive after House Democrats partnering with a handful of House Republicans triggered an up or down vote through a discharge petition. Other than that vote, what have Republicans done to make life better or meet the needs of the American people in any way, shape, or form throughout this Congress? The answer is nada, nothing. They've done nothing. And so all their members do is cook up these unhinged censure resolutions, literally week after week after week. That's all they do, which is why they're deeply in trouble. Donald Trump's approval rating is like 38, 39% across the board, including from Fox News. And the American people know that Democrats are the party who actually care about addressing the affordability crisis, driving down the high cost of living, fixing our broken health care system, extending the Affordable Care Act tax credits, and actually standing up for working class Americans. Now that is decisively clear to the American people. We've seen that in the electoral results early this month, where Republicans were crushed, shellacked, beaten down all across America, with the common thread being their extremism and our emphasis on affordability. And now we've seen that the American people are ready to throw these House Republicans out of their majority. And it's incredible to me that despite where we are, after all the talk from Republicans that they somehow had earned some big historic mandate, can't find it. Search committee has been sent out. No one can find it. It's been destroyed. that you would think Republicans would actually hear the American people in terms of their desire to work on issues that matter. And instead, we continue to see censure resolution after censure resolution after censure resolution, and they can't even succeed in censuring the people they're going after.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Are you at all concerned that the recent allegations against Democrats, such as communicating with sex offender and embezzling FEMA funds, are going to harm the momentum that your party carried out of the elections earlier this month?
We're going to continue to focus on the issues that matter for the American people: affordability, lower the high cost of living, health care. We've got to fix our broken health care system, and that begins with renewing the Affordable Care Act tax credits, not allowing Republicans to destroy the Affordable Care Act. And we have to clean up corruption, which we are experiencing in real time. And we've got to deal with in the Congress, in the Supreme Court, and certainly with this administration, which is running the largest pay-to-play scheme in the history of the world. Here's the interesting thing about Donald Trump and the Republicans. They've done nothing to make life better for everyday Americans, nothing to fix our broken healthcare system, nothing to lower the high cost of living, but everything in the world possible to enrich themselves, their friends, and their families. That's corruption in real time, and the American people are rejecting it.
Can you talk to me a little bit more about the broader Democratic affordability agenda? You talked about the ACA tax credits. If you had the majority right now, what would you do to lower inflation, which is notoriously difficult to handle?
Well, we need to work in a variety of different areas, and of course, the American people are most concerned about health care, housing, and grocery prices. And so in the next few weeks, and certainly in the early part of next year, we'll talk with a greater degree of specificity about some of the policies that we actually believe need to be implemented. But here's something that we can start with: getting rid of the Trump tariffs, which are costing the average American family thousands of dollars in additional expense per year. Get rid of the Trump tariffs. That's something that can be easily done. They should never have been put in place in the first place. It was an overreach by Donald Trump. It may get struck down by the Supreme Court, but the Congress should have never allowed it to happen, because Donald Trump doesn't have the unilateral authority to impose tariffs, but the Trump tariffs are crushing everyday Americans, and that's where we can actually start right now to make a difference in America, a country that's far too expensive, and ease some of the crushing burden that has been placed by Republican policies on everyday Americans.
Thank you. Just to clarify on the censure motion, but prior to the vote on make this censure, it was the third time, I believe, that Eva Clark brought that censure resolution on Corey Mills. When you say unhinged censure resolutions, are you talking about Democratic brought censure resolutions?
I am talking about Republicans who have spent all year trying to censure members of the House Democratic Caucus, and they did the same thing in the last Congress. They have no agenda. Republicans have complete control of government. They have the House, they have the Senate, they have the presidency. And yet all we see, because Mike Johnson has no control over the House Republican Conference. Nice guy, but zero control over the House Republican Conference. In fact, his own president, Donald Trump, says he's got two titles. Donald Trump, President and Speaker of the House. Man, you letting the president punk you like that? Publicly? So there's zero control that the deputy speaker has over, talking about Mike Johnson, deputy speaker, zero control that he has over the House Republican Conference. So they're running wild. And all they are doing, because they have zero policies to make life better for the American people, is to cook up censure resolutions week after week after week. And that process needs to be brought under control. Do I expect that Mike Johnson is going to do it? Of course not. However, if there's a bipartisan proposal led on our side by Don Beyer, a very thoughtful member, then perhaps that is something that's worthy of consideration.
Mr. Leader, regardless of who is getting censured or not censured, these are two politicians from Florida, Mills and Shirley McCormick. You just said that she deserves her day in court and presumption of innocence. In the past, the DCCC and many Democrats have gone after Mills for his serious allegations. So how do you square the difference between those two with your messaging?
What I'm suggesting is that anyone who has been indicted is entitled to the presumption of innocence. In fact, I was very clear about that when Donald Trump was indicted 4 different times in 4 different jurisdictions. And in each and every instance, I was very clear, strongly disagree with Donald Trump's behavior, his conduct, and his fitness for office, but notwithstanding my assessment of this guy, the reality was, as an American, he was entitled to the presumption of innocence in every single one of those cases, and I repeatedly made that clear. So yes, I'm applying the same standard at all times, whether it's Donald Trump or whether it's a member of Congress or whether it's the people that I'm privileged to represent, most importantly, back home in Brooklyn. At all times, every American, pursuant to the United States Constitution, is entitled to the presumption of innocence and their day in court.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. I know your position on extending the ACA credits, but Senator Rick Scott introduced a proposal today called the More Affordable Care Act. It says it keeps the Affordable Care Act framework in place, but redirects federal funds from the subsidies to what they're calling Trump Health Freedom Accounts. I want to get your reaction to that proposal. And it seems that I'm just curious, what's the path forward to extending the tax credits from the minority? In the times that they've been extended before, Democrats were in the majority. I'm just curious if they're putting forward proposals for HSAs or Trump Health Freedom Accounts. How do you get to a conversation about extending the tax credits when it didn't turn out during the shutdown?
It's interesting to me that Rick Scott and all of these MAGA extremists in the House and the Senate proceeded with great urgency throughout the entirety of the first half of this year to pass their one big ugly bill, which included the largest cut to Medicaid in American history. And by the way, I think Rick Scott has some history with Medicaid fraud in the state of Florida, so he's no expert on health care. We ain't going to be lectured by Rick Scott about anything, but certainly not affordable health care, given his track record. But they raced to enact the largest cut to Medicaid in American history, devastated communities all across America where you have hospitals, nursing homes, and community-based health centers closing in real time, including in rural parts of the country. In that same one big ugly bill, they ripped food away from hungry children, seniors, and veterans and enacted a $186 billion cut to SNAP, which also happens to be the largest cut to nutritional assistance in American history. And why did the extremists do all of this? So they could pass massive tax breaks for their billionaire donors, and they made those tax breaks permanent. So they spent the first 6 months of this year focused on subsidizing the lifestyles of the rich and shameless in their one big ugly bill, but can't be bothered to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits. Even now, we're less than 45 days away from those tax credits expiring, and tens of millions of Americans, including in Florida, are about to see their premiums, copays, and deductibles skyrocket in ways that will make their health care unaffordable. So from our standpoint, this is not that complicated. We have a discharge petition. I believe it has north of 200 signatures on it. All we need is 3 or 4 Republicans to join us. And if they did so, we can discharge a bill that would extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits for 3 years. Everyday Americans, working class Americans, and middle class Americans deserve the same level of certainty that Republicans decided to provide to their billionaire donors when they enacted these massive tax breaks and then had the nerve to make those massive tax breaks permanent. But can't be bothered to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits. Now, we're going to work closely with our Democratic colleagues in the Senate on the vote that is scheduled no later than the second week of December on a Democratic proposal related to extending the Affordable Care Act tax credits. And I expect that we're going to be in alignment. And at this point, Republicans just need to take yes for an answer. Say yes to your constituents who you're jamming up right now and who are about to suffer even more from the Republican health care crisis.
After the blocking of the maps by the federal court in Texas, on Texas maps, do you expect any change from any of the other states like Virginia in the strategy, or is it like full speed ahead?
Our strategy is full speed ahead. We are not unilaterally disarming. We are not rolling over and playing dead. And we also have no interest in spiking the football. What we are doing is going to make sure that Donald Trump and Republican sycophants are unable to gerrymander the national congressional map in a way that will allow them to rig the midterm elections. We made that clear from the very beginning. And we are not going to take our foot off the gas pedal until we are certain that the American people are guaranteed a free and fair midterm election in November of 2026.
Congressman Byron Baker said that the censure is broken in the House. Do you agree with that conclusion? And do you see a role for yourself and Speaker Johnson to work on kind of reining in the use of it, just given how many we saw this week and the rise in them in recent years?
Republicans have broken the censure in the House of Representatives. It is broken. The extremists have broken it because they have no agenda, no vision, no plans, no legislation to make life better for the American people and address the affordability crisis that's crushing everyday Americans. And so they're obsessed with censures. But what did they not get from the results of them being destroyed across the country? The American people know electorally. The American people know they have no agenda. Why are they doubling and tripling down on this extreme censure approach? It's getting them nowhere. And so we're trying to help them out. Don Byers trying to help them out. Get out of your own way. Now, do I think that Mike Johnson, nice guy, right? But do I think that Mike Johnson has any interest in actually reining in his extreme members? Of course not. He doesn't have any control over them. You know, I think he talked about dignity and decency and things of that nature, and then all we're seeing is Republicans do the exact opposite. It's extraordinary to me. We had patriotic members of the House and the Senate have their lives threatened by Donald Trump in the most unhinged, unacceptable, unconscionable, and un-American way. Disgusting and dangerous what Donald Trump has said in accusing patriotic members of Congress and the Senate who served this country well of treason and suggesting they should be killed. That's disgusting. But we, of course, have come to expect this from Donald Trump. What's extraordinary to me is that Mike Johnson doesn't even have the decency to distance himself from Donald Trump's death threats leveled at patriotic members of Congress. Even John Thune found it reasonable for him to say he disagrees with what Donald Trump accused members of Congress of doing earlier today. Even John Thune had the decency to distance himself from Donald Trump's remarks. But Mike Johnson couldn't say a thing about it. And his silence speaks volumes. Thank you, everyone.